There is a chance that the Chargers have to replace Khalil Mack and Odafe Oweh this free agency. Could they take a big swing on someone like Trey Hendrickson?
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, man? Welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons, but this is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day as part of the #1 sports podcast network. And David, today we're going edge shopping.
Yes, we are. We got to take a look at some potential options just in case the Chargers can't bring back Khalil Mack and Odafe Oweh.
And I think the other part of it is if they can only bring back one, right? But today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. David, there is uncertainty surrounding the edges. There is at least a chance, I mean, we talked about it with Daniel Popper earlier today, that the Chargers lose out on both Khalil Mack and Odafe Oweh. I don't think it's going to happen. But if it does happen, now everything's on the table because you have potentially, $35 to $40 million you didn't think you'd have available to you. And maybe,
at least,
just maybe, and Popper even brought his name up earlier, they could take a big swing, take both of what they were going to pay both those guys and go after someone like a Trey Hendrickson, which could combine with Tuli Tuipulotu to become one of the more dangerous pass rushing duos in the league.
Yeah, Trey Hendrickson is an absolute monster. Don't look at last year and have that be any indication of what this guy has been able to do, because you would be doing yourself a disservice. We're talking about a guy who has the third most sacks in the league since 2020 and at 74 and a half. And yeah, he only had 4 sacks last year, but he was dealing with an injury. Of course, getting a lot of this information from Daniel Popper's phenomenal article about his 150 top free agents. But before last year, it was back-to-back seasons of 17 and a half sacks apiece. We're talking about towards the top of the NFL in getting after the quarterback. And obviously, that's going to require top of the NFL type of money, as the contract projection is 3 years and $99 million. So it's not going to come cheap, but production like that never does.
And I mean, if you give a contract out like that, right, you're hoping to get 2 years of that still, prime Trey Hendrickson. And I think last year, only playing 7 games is made a little bit better by the fact that the 5 seasons before that, he was so healthy and played in no less than 15 games. And to your point, during those 5 seasons, he had 70 and a half sacks, right? Like it wasn't just that he can produce at a high level where he's done it a couple times. Consistently, year in and year out, he's putting together, I mean, that's averaging 14 sacks over those 5 seasons, which is just insane, obviously. But you're right, it is going to cost a lot. And this is a guy that would be, worth it to some degree, especially just as a pure pass rusher. Like maybe you have to bring in someone as, maybe a Bud Dupree replacement that can be more stout against the run, right? And that's where you kind of spend some money elsewhere there. At the same time, this is a guy, I mean, only a couple of years ago led the NFL with 83 pressures, right? Like this guy is showing up on a week in and week out basis. And I think obviously this only really happens in, a situation in which you probably lose out on both of those guys, Khalil Mack and Odafe Oweh. But I think as far as yes, I would rather spend my money at the top end of the market on offensive linemen. But if you can piece it together with mid-market deals there and you want to make a big splash on free agency and try to kind of change the whole dynamic of your defense and the talent level on it right now because he's better than Khalil Mack and Odafe Oweh, yeah, I mean, you could do worse than getting Trey Hendrickson. And now that he was not franchise tagged, at least that is on the table if the Chargers want to make a run. And you have guys like, Jonathan Betts on Twitter, who's had some of these breaking stories saying the Chargers would be interested. So I take all that stuff with a grain of salt. There's a lot of stuff flying around right now. But there are some people that think they would be interested in him now that he is available, and especially, with the uncertainty around their own free agents. But David, as far as guys that would be more realistic, though, maybe in the mid of the market, I think both of us saw someone like a Jadeveon Clowney where it's like, hey, a stopgap, maybe you take him and then draft somebody early at the position. But I don't think he'd be a terrible option for the Chargers, at least in a short-term deal.
No, Jadeveon Clowney to me is the pass rusher assassin for hire. He's played with so many different teams, but he's been able to provide quality play pretty much wherever he's been. And last year 8.5 sacks with 40 pressures, a 19.1 pressure rate, which ranked fourth amongst all players with at least 200 pass rush snaps. That's really good quality production, and a guy who's solid against the run as well. He's got a very good frame for that. He's a pretty complete edge rusher, and with a contract projection at 1 year, $12 million. I think that's something that I would sign on the dotted line right now. I feel like for the player that you're getting, I think that's a good value.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the only weird thing about him specifically is just the fact that like he didn't play a ton of snaps, right? Like like for a guy who produced at that level and still had 8.5 sacks last year, to play kind of just as like a role player almost on that defense seemed a little bit weird because I mean 40 pressures is pretty good when you're talking about ranked 13th in PFF's win percentage out of 91 rushers with at least 200 snaps. And he getting 40 pressures in 13 games isn't bad. And I think this is also like, hey, you can't necessarily rely on a rookie to come in and give you great contributions right away, right? So if you want a bridge type of player, you take someone like a Jadeveon Clowney, you take a edge rusher in the first or second round this year, and now I think you have something to feel decent about, even if you were to lose both of your big edge rushers, if you had to go in that direction. But I think someone like Jadeveon Clowney, a short-term option, yeah, I mean I could get behind that because the dude is 33 and just turned 33, but every season you keep thinking he's going to fall off a little bit, and there he is, still playing at an incredibly high level. But just surprised to see him only play 650-ish snaps last year on that defense. But I think he could do a lot more given more snaps, and he just continues to be really solid. But we're going to get into some more mid to lower tier free agents as contingency plans for the Chargers, as they might have to be going edge shopping coming up here pretty quick, and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. We live in a world where you can stream anything, order food in minutes, and carry supercomputers in our pockets. And somehow, buying tickets to a live game still feels complicated. Hidden fees, jumping prices, endless steps. There has to be a better way, and that's why I use the Game Time app. It gives fans the advantage and makes getting tickets simple, whether it's NFL games, concerts, comedy, or whatever you're into. I jumped on the app to check out tickets for an upcoming game, and it honestly took me minutes, and honestly, I was surprised because the Game Time app actually made me realize that the NCAA tournament is coming to San Diego, and you can get in on the madness for less than $300, which is kind of a bucket list thing to go watch an NCAA tournament game. And you know exactly the view that you're getting from your seat, and you know exactly what price you're going to be paying. 2 taps, and you have great seats locked in. Fast, easy, done. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person, walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. David, let's get into some other edge options here because the Chargers, obviously, I think no matter what, like probably the most likely situation at this point is that they find a way to bring one of them back, right? And even if you bring one of them back with Kyle Kennard and Bud Dupree being the other guys besides Tuli Tuipulotu, they're going to be shopping to some degree. So when you were looking through the edge rushers, who was another guy that you saw and said, hey, maybe this is someone the Chargers kick the tires on?
Yeah, another guy that I saw that might make a little bit of sense was Al-Quadin Muhammad. And I apologize for butchering that name if I did, but 31 years old, had 11 sacks in 2025. He's much more of a speed type rusher, a guy that's going to, get after the quarterback. But for that type of production with a contract projection of 2 years, $18 million, I think that is fantastic quality, type of play for that valuation there. 53 pressures, 11 sacks, a pressure rate over 15%. That's some really, really high quality play for an edge rusher. I think that would fit, pretty well with what the Chargers want to do.
Yeah, and I mean that, information from Daniel Popper's top 150, I mean, you see that and you wonder why his projection for it is only $9 million per season. You know what I mean? Because it's like, hey, 11 sacks, but it is also the only time I think he's had more than 6 sacks in a season. So this was kind of an outlier season for him. But if you're talking about, a bridge type of player to get a 31-year-old like him, not the worst that you can do, right? 53 pressures on 353 pass rushing snaps, pretty good. Better as a pass rusher than a run defender for sure. But yeah, I mean, for $9 million to get, a quality play, a quality rotational player, I think that's about what it costs in the NFL right now. I think Boye Mafe is a really interesting one. Someone that Daniel Popper's really high on, has him as a 4-year, $73 million projection from Daniel Popper, his 26th overall free agent, which is crazy, mostly because he only had 2 sacks last year as part of an obviously loaded Seahawks defense, right? Kind of fell out of the rotation there a little bit. Didn't have the sack numbers that, you would think would be getting you, under $20 million, but $17 million per season or around there. But I don't know if it'll be that much. I think I disagree with Pop there as far as, the AAV on that. But I think a good skill set to have across from Tuli Tuipulotu if the Chargers did miss out on their edge rushers, right? Played in a similar defense, obviously, with Mike McDonald. I think the red flag here would be that since Mike McDonald took over, he's gotten phased out a little bit, right? And hasn't been a full-time starter. And they have other guys like Chen Nwosu. They have DeMarcus Lawrence. They have other guys that have taken some of those snaps away. But even this year, playing about half of the snaps, he still had 40 pressures and an 11.8% pressure rate. And as a full-time starter in 2023, he did have a 9-sack season. So an interesting one there, I think mostly for me, skill set wise, to go on the other end to try to get something close to like an Odafe Oweh and someone that at the right price, I think you could find more to what his skill set could bring to the table if they needed to. Anyone else that you want to bring up as far as edge options before we get out of here?
Yeah, the last option I think here is probably the most unrealistic, but I still feel like he can provide quality play. It's Cam Jordan, the longtime New Orleans Saint edge rusher. Yes, he's 37 years old, and there's a chance out there that he may call it a career, and probably a Hall of Fame career at that. But if he does continue to play, he had a very productive year last year, 10.5 sacks, 36 pressures, a pressure rate of 11.2, which was one of his highest in since 2020. Again, an older guy, but this guy is a great run defender. Had 7 tackles for loss plus run stuffs last season, and he's just always been really, really solid. Always been a very, very strong leader on that Saints defense. So I feel like if you're just looking for somebody who's just going to be a 1-year guy that is going to provide quality play on the edge, I think you could do a lot worse than Cam Jordan.
Yeah, Cam Jordan, another one of those guys, like Mike Evans we talked about yesterday. It's just like, hey, guy you've admired from afar for a long time, a super solid player. I wonder, like, his fit-wise with the Chargers, because he's not like an outside linebacker where he's going to drop into coverage at time for, like, the sim pressures and things like that, like a Khalil Mack has done or Odafe Oweh was doing. Tuli, not really his game either, but kind of a bigger body as far as, like, a tweener. Is he like a defensive end, right? Is he rushing inside on this defense? But, man, I mean, obviously a player who his production speaks for himself. He's been a really awesome player. If they want to do that in the short term and feel like he fits and Chris O'Leary sees it, I could sign off on it. I'll bring one more here. Kingsley Enagbare, the Packers edge rusher. One of the Packers writers, Easton Butler, said the Chargers are keeping tabs on him, which obviously take with a grain of salt, but it just brings a reason to talk about, Daniel Popper's 119th ranked free agent that they has, having a 10.6% pressure rate, which isn't terrible, honestly, but has him as a contract projected 3 years, $18.5 million, ranked 65 out of 91 edge rushers last year, and win percentage on PFF, only had 2 sacks. Not nearly good enough to replace an Odafe Oweh or a Khalil Mack. Would not be one of my top options, but this would be more of like a rotational guy if you feel really good about the guys you have as the top 3, which would be, potentially Tuli, Oweh, or Mack, and one other guy before I'm getting to the Kingsley Enagbares of the world, in my opinion. But just interesting because, the Chargers, obviously, there's a lot of smoke out there right now. There's a lot of agents that are talking to people right now, which is why you're seeing so much of this kind of smoke out there. And it is always interesting to hear, kind of who they might be potentially interested in. And obviously, one of their biggest things, especially defensively, is taking guys like a Boye Mafe who has 2 sacks, or even a Kingsley Enagbare, and finding a way to get a lot more out of them, right? Because that's been really on the defensive, or on the defensive side, how they've operated, and they've shown that they can do that. So you're always kind of wondering, like, oh well, maybe the Chargers do see something there where they feel like they can get more out of it, and obviously it's not going to come at a hugely costly contract. But
and you believe it, right? You believe it now because of the coaches they have on that side.
Yes. Yeah, and even more on offense now, right? But I'm going to give that more of a benefit of the doubt, obviously, now that Mike McDaniel has taken over. But that is going to wrap things up for today's show. If you didn't, make sure you already, check out the interview we had earlier on today with Daniel Popper, who broke the Tyler Biadasz news of the Chargers working out centers, which is obviously great. They need a bunch of interior offensive linemen. But we will be back with you guys on Monday. We hope all the everydayers are out here, enjoying these bonus episodes. We appreciate you guys for all of your support. To make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and listen wherever you get your podcast from. And if you want an ad-free version of the podcast, the audio version, you can get that now in the Locked On Everydayer Club. And since free agency has started, you get an extra discount, because if you use the code FREEAGENCY, all caps, no spaces, through March 15th, you can go ad-free, and you'll get 1 free month of that in the Everydayer Club. So join the show, or join the club. You can find it in the show notes. And if you guys want to hit us up, you can do it every day, where you can find the show at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. But we'll be back with you on Monday with more free agency frenzy, because it is getting close. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.